So we got more GM news. CNBC is talking about it again with former Ford CEO Mark Fields. So let's check him out.
General Motors out with its second quarter earnings this morning, reporting an adjusted $191 a share that beat the expectations of $1.85. Revenue beat expectations too, $44.7 billion. We want to break down this report with former Ford president and CEO Mark Fields. Mark is also a CNBC contributor. And Mark, what do you think of the numbers?
Well, this is a very strong quarter for GM. The revenues were up about 25% versus last year. Their pricing held up really well. They beat on the top and bottom lines, and they raised guidance. So the bottom line is the pent-up demand is still there, and customers are still willing to pay for good product. And so it was a very strong quarter for it.
A lot of people are wondering, though, what to make of the new EV brands, how much demand is out there, particularly when we've seen price cuts recently from both Ford and from Tesla. What do you think? What's the feeling you're getting just from where consumers are, whether there are more consumers who will be brought into these, whether they can maintain pricing?
Well, we're literally at, I'd say, a bit of a make or break moment for the industry when it comes to EVs. You got a lot of capacity coming online. You got a lot of new products. For example, GM is launching their their Silverado EV, their Blazer EV, and importantly, their Equinox EV. You're seeing inventories for EVs about double what it is for internal combustion engines. So, even though we set a record for EVs in the second quarter, EV demand is not keeping up with production. And I think the most important launch for EVs right now in the industry is coming up in the second half of this year, which is the Equinox, which is Chevy's second best-selling model, competing in the highest volume segment. And they're targeting a $30,000 price range. So you're taking the price issue off the table for consumers around EVs. And so if GM isn't successful in ramping sales of that, not only is GM going to have a problem, but the industry is going to have a problem. So it's going to be interesting to see how that product is accepted in the marketplace.
So it looks like the Equinox is their answer to the Model Y, right? So here's their Q2 earnings deck they got here. So we're getting the Silverado. This quarter, the Silverado is coming out along with the Blazer is coming out, and the Equinox EV is coming out in Q4 of 2023. So we're going to see how that goes. There's a lot of, they got all 6 of these, or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of these EVs coming out this year. So I don't know what their capacity is. I have no idea how they're factored. Is this a new factory? Is this an old factory? Is this like a brand new mega factory like Gigafactory like Tesla has? Or is this their old factories converted? I'm not sure about all that. That'd be very interesting to do research on and find out. But yeah, the Equinox, that's kind of their big Model Y competitor. They're gonna try and target 30,000. They are definitely gonna be losing money on that. Huge amounts of money on that. So it all depends on how fast they can scale, how efficient their new battery, what is it called? Their Ultium battery stuff is going, how suppliers, like, I don't know, they got to prove a lot. So they don't release their numbers on their EV profitability and stuff. It's very frustrating that they don't release those numbers, like how much profit they make on them, how much they lose. Ford does, Tesla obviously does, but GM doesn't. I don't know. Am I right about that? Let me know in the comment section if there is a place where they actually show the profitability of their EV lineup. I want to know, because I know Ford was losing an average of negative 40% for like minus 40% margins for most of the year, and then the Q1 they lost 102%. So I want to see Ford's numbers as well, but I did find an Inside EV article showing their sales, their EV sales for Q2. So the EV sales was 15,000 EVs they sold, and but the Bolt is is getting decommissioned. They're taking it out. It's going away. So minus the EV sales, they only sold 1,600 EVs, and they want to scale to 1 million by 2025 is what they said. Where is it? Up here? No, it's down here. So they want to scale to 1 million vehicles by 2025. This is where right here. Their target 1 million annual EV capacity in North America by 2025. So a little weird wording there, but they want to hit 1 million by 2025, and they've only sold 1,600 non-Bolt EVs in Q2. So I don't know what the hell is going on with that, but let's continue.
Sounds skeptical, and I wonder if that makes you skeptical of these goals to be like an all EV fleet by the year 2030. What do you think of that?
Well, I'm not skeptical about the transition from internal combustion engines to battery-powered vehicles. I'm actually very bullish on it. What I am skeptical about, it's going to happen slower than people expect. Because at the end of the day, if you look at history in industries, right? When you think of Netflix, when they went from sending DVDs home to actually streaming them to customers, there was a big issue around, can that company and that industry make that transition? I think they were successful. That the key there is they made lives easier for consumers. And right now with EVs, for the most part, you still have they're still more expensive than gas-powered vehicles. That's going to be solved by the industry. But secondly, it's the charging infrastructure. And if you're making, at least initially, life more difficult for consumers, they usually take the path of least resistance when it comes to new vehicles and when they're making a big purchase like that. So it's going to happen, but there's a mismatch right now, I think, amongst the industry and analysts around how fast that's going to happen.
I got to push back on that. So I drive a Tesla. I have a Model Y and a Model 3, and it's by far easier than an internal combustion engine car. I had an Acura previously, and I had a bunch of gas-powered cars before that. So like I said on my other videos, so for me, I come home, if the battery is low, I plug it in, and that's it. I know I never have to go to a gas station, never have to get oil changes, I never have to do brake pad changes. There's no maintenance on these cars. I've had my Model 3 for 5 years, and we just got the air filter changed the other day, and that's it. There's never been any other maintenance on the Model 3. And I got my Model Y last summer, zero maintenance as well. So in terms of like the charging thing, like you just come home, you plug it in, and if it's low, you plug it in, you wake up and it's fully charged, you leave. So there hasn't been any problem. And if I do travel, like, a little further out, there's superchargers all over the place. So it's never been an issue. I find it actually easier because I'm in Canada, I'm in Toronto. We have crazy harsh winters. And I remember going to a gas station in the winter, filling up the gas tank when it's freezing outside. I never have to deal with that ever again. I just come home in my garage, plug it in, and it's fully charged in the morning. So I charge it about once a week because I do not that much driving. My wife does a little bit more. She has to charge it like 2 or 3 times, but you come home, you plug it in, you wake up, it's fully charged. So I know initially people are like, what about the range and anxiety? I've never had range anxiety. I've never experienced any of that. You just, go to a supercharger if you don't have a home. A lot of condos have charging stuff in it now. But yeah, it's never been an issue. For me personally, it's never been an issue. And everyone I talk to with Teslas, it's never really been an issue. It's only an issue to people that don't drive electric cars because they don't know. They're unsure. They hear these things in the news. Oh, it's going to be difficult to charge. But if you have access to, a home and you have a garage, or like I said, a lot of condos have it, or even like if you have a condo and there's a supercharger close by, you're good to go. So I had to push back on that a little bit there.
So the other issue facing all of the big three is what happens with the UAW. You've got their contract up at the end of September, and we've spent a little bit of time talking about this morning. We had a former labor undersecretary with us earlier this morning who said, look, they're going to have a hard time telling the union that they can't pay all of their demands when we just saw a report on CNBC that says they're making money hand over fist. What's your reaction to that?
Well, listen, any successful negotiation with any automotive labor union around the world, it starts with making sure you're having conversations during the entire contract period, not just when you have a contract coming up. But clearly, the OEMs, the automakers, are going to have a very difficult set of negotiations. For the point that you mentioned, Becky, their profits have been very high. There's a little bit of a labor renaissance, if you will, in the U.S. and the movement. And you have, importantly, a new leadership at the UAW that feels that they have a mandate to improve their salaries, get cost of living adjustments, improvements in pension and healthcare. At the same time, the automakers are facing, as I mentioned earlier, with the EVs, their margins are lower if they're even positive at this point.
No,
and that's
they're not.
going to be a big drag on the automakers. And that's why you see, for example, I think General Motors up their cost savings objectives from $2 to $3 billion through next year, because I think they're looking forward and they're saying, hey, we're going to have to get through this chasm of EV adoption, and particularly while margins are either negative or just lower than internal combustion engines. So it's going to be, I think, a contentious set of negotiations. But at the end of the day, the optics are there, and with all the profits that the automakers have made over the last 3 or 4 years, there's a perception amongst the rank and file that they want to get their quote unquote fair share. And I think the automakers are going to have to come up with a fair contract, but it's going to add costs to their business. And that's why you're seeing, folks like GM up their cost reduction objectives.
Oh, man. So that's another layer in there that's going to make it difficult for GM. So that's what they were talking about. Okay, so contracts are up and there's new negotiations for these unions. And then they just released their earnings report. They're like, we're making so much money. We're making billions of dollars. And now they have to negotiate with the unions on pay and stuff. So, wow. And then, there's this workers' renaissance happening with the actors union, and all around the world is kind of happening too. So about billionaires and why the CEOs make like 800 times the amount of the the lowest ranking employee, and all this stuff is going on. So this is going to add even more friction for them. They have all these hurdles to cross. So that union negotiation is going to come in. They're going to want way more money because of inflation and living costs, and the fact that GM just had this super positive quarter and they're making all this money, making all these price cuts. So the unions are a big friction point in GM. The transition to EVs is another huge friction point for GM. Because they lose. So if Ford is losing 40%, average of 40%. Last quarter, they lost 102%. I'm just going to say 40 because that might have been an anomaly. We'll see when their earnings report comes out pretty soon. If they're losing negative 40%, Ford is, then what do you think GM is doing? So GM, they do not release their darn EV profitability numbers, so we don't know how much they're losing, but we've heard reports that the Bolt has never turned a profit at all. So and then the Bolt is getting decommissioned. So the transition from internal combustion engines to EVs is going to be difficult. Dealing with the union, because for EVs there's way less parts, so they need less people. There's barely any maintenance, so the service centers a lot of them are going to have to go in the transition. So there's a lot of friction here for GM to get through. And then all the promises they made, all these crazy promises that Mary Barra was talking about, like 1 million car annual production by 2025. That's in a year and a half, basically, less than a year and a half, that she thinks they're going to go from 1,600 cars to 1 million cars. That's unbelievable. That's not going to happen. There's no way that's going to happen. And then she also said by the second quarter of 2020, by the second half of the year, GM wants to have 100,000 EVs made by the second half of the year. So what is happening here? Like, what is she talking about? So in Q2, all right, the total BEV deliveries was 15,000. And she's talking about the second half of the year. They want GM to produce 100,000. That's just not going to happen with these numbers. Hey, if they do, I'll be the first to come on here and say I was totally wrong. And somehow they did it. Their factories came online. They produced a ton of EVs and they killed it. And Tesla, it's got to be worried a bit. But as of now, like seeing the numbers on this, like I don't know how that's going to happen. And also because the Bolt is going out of commission. So to say all that stuff, 1 million annually by 2025, like that's just kind of ridiculous. But hey, if they can pull it off, that'll be great for transitioning the world to electric vehicles. You know, we're mostly a Tesla channel here, but I do want to see the transition happen. I want to see, you know, more EVs, more battery packs, more solar, more just like energy independence for the planet, basically for everyone. So if the transition gets sped up, if GM can do this, can pull it off, then that'll be pretty amazing. But man, they got a lot of hurdles to overcome. So let me know your thoughts on what do you think of GM? Are they going to make it? Are they going to, I can't wait to see if they're going to if they're going to delay any of these cars. I have a feeling they're going to delay all of them, but I want to see the Silverado truck. I'm really interested to see that, how it performs, the price, the range. I want to see all that when it comes out. I haven't seen any on the roads. There's no pictures of it anywhere. So these are all just like renderings. It looks like not even real pictures, but I can't wait to see that. Let me know your thoughts. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of my Tesla coverage, the stock and EV coverage. So subscribe. 97% of you guys are not subbed. So I highly recommend subscribing because I'm going to be dropping videos like this all the time, and they're going to keep getting better and better. I'm going to get better at this, and the video quality, everything's going to get better. We're going to have a great time. All right. So subscribe to the channel, hit the like button. That really helps, and I'll see you next time.